Hey guys, welcome to Wager Talk TV. This is 2 and Out, week 9 of the CFL season. Week 9, we are pretty much halfway through the regular season, and a lot to discuss today. The insider Rob Braley is back for this one. Andrew McInnes, fresh off another winner, back for this one. And Andrew, let's bring you in first before we get to Rob. Huge game out in your neck of the woods. Touchdown CFL, the Toronto Argonauts. Yes, I'm talking about the Toronto Argonauts again. 6-0 took on Saskatchewan in that game. I watched most of the game. I kind of wish there was a little more scoring in that one. But Andrew, tell me about the atmosphere in your hometown when two CFL teams and the fan bases came to visit.
Yeah, great to be here with you guys, Carm. Look, I mean, it was awesome. It was a really good environment for the Touchdown Atlantic here in Halifax. It was interesting because you could tell the atmosphere was there. People were cheering. People were excited to get out. It was a 5 o'clock local start. I don't think there was one person in attendance without a drink in their hand. There was a lot of fun being had, but I found that nobody really knew who to cheer for. That was one thing that was interesting, was like all the people that were local, they were like trying to decide who they wanted to cheer for. There were a few local guys on each team. But one thing I will say is that the fan bases traveled well for both Saskatchewan and the Argos. But I was sat next to a lot of Riders fans. They were very intense. They were very hard on their team. They cheered when they played well, but they booed them a lot when they were not playing well. But it was a good game. But I'll tell you, not just 6-0 now for the Argos, 6-0 ATS as well. When the Argos win, they are also covering point spreads. They are a point covering machine. And I know Andy Lang, he's actually been diving into the CFL a little bit. One thing he keeps pointing out that I agree with him, if you check it out, the Argos are a big first half team. They have great first halves. They come out very strong. And in the second halves, they run the ball a lot more. So maybe something for people out there to keep an eye on, Carm, that if you're looking to bet this team when the spread is pretty big, although they are covering, they're covering it a lot easier in the first half. So just something to look out for.
That's Andrew, our CFL expert at Wager Talk, and you can find him on Twitter at McInnes Picks. Andrew, and this is something I'm going to talk to Rob about. I've always thought, and maybe he can correct me, that of all the CFL fan bases, that Saskatchewan is probably the one that travel the most. They're the ones that come out in full force for their team, and there must be a lot of them. And yes, they do like to drink. So I'm pretty sure they had drinks in hand. But at least for your home base, hopefully they got a game that they enjoy. They probably wanted some more points than that 31-13 final. That game looked like a dead under for a long time, and then while it did finish under, there was a chance at the end for it to go over the total. From the people from your town, from the people from the area, the city, um, are they hoping for a CFL team sometime in the future? Expansion?
We've been hoping for years, Carmen, and I see that the CFL commissioner and everybody a part of it right now at this point, they need that extra team. They need another team here in the East Coast, in the East Division. For me, it's all about the stadium. And I think that it was a really big step in the right direction for the work they put in to create the capacity they were able to have. I think that the final numbers were close to, I think, like 8,000, 9,000. And that was just something that was kind of thrown together over a few months. So I think, kind of similar to what the Montreal Alouettes do, where they play at the McGill University Stadium. I feel like that's the most likely scenario if they play at the St. Mary's Huskies Stadium here in Halifax, and they kind of combine together to share that field. It's worked very well for the Alouettes playing at McGill. They seem to have a great fan base, so I see no problem why it wouldn't happen here. And the second option would be sharing a field, and the two different owners of the Halifax Wanderers soccer team, the pro soccer team, teaming up together with the local team. So that's what I'd like, and I think it could work out.
Yeah, I think the main thing is, and we're going to bring Rob just in a couple of minutes, is ticket sales, and of course season ticket sales. I think the CFL is a league that relies predominantly on, because of the TV contracts, a lot on season ticket sales and game day ticket sales. So they need that money. So you're going to need to get a lot of fans out there to make it work, at least in the short term. Speaking of Montreal that you just talked about, let's get into our market mover section and tell us what you got, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm going to look at the Montreal and Hamilton game for this week as the market mover. There'll be all kinds of different options really each week to discuss. And well, as I keep discussing with you and Rob, it doesn't really seem to be beneficial to be betting on the teams that are getting all the money. I cannot believe that Edmonton, of all teams, was actually taking lots of money and pushing that number down last week against BC. But here I take a look at Hamilton. The early numbers, they opened up as favorites. Very quickly, we saw a little bit of a reverse here, and Montreal now favorites. I'm seeing 2.5, and it's on the way to 3. Hamilton been playing a lot better football, but does it have a lot to do with the competition they've been playing? That's what we'll find out. But Hamilton, they're looking better. And I think that if you kind of like them, you can wait and get that better number. But as far as Montreal right now, they're taking the money in this spot as Hamilton opened up as slight favorites.
Yep. And Andrew, I tend to agree with you. Montreal off a good win against the Calgary Stampeders, 25-18, I think was that score line. And it's something I'm going to talk to Rob about in this upcoming segment. So without further ado, let's bring him in, the insider, Rob Braley. Rob, I know you watched that game, the Argos, your second favorite team against the Saskatchewan Rough Riders, but you're wearing the Hamilton hat. Before we get to Hamilton, I just want to talk to you about the scheduling as well too. A couple things, so something to digest. We're going to talk about scheduling and the whole whole expansion thing if it could ever happen in the future. But any quick thoughts on Touchdown Atlantic?
I watched the game. It looked like a fantastic crowd. I looked at the ticket sales; like they were 8,000. They're outselling Argonaut home games. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But to break even or make money in the CFL, you really need 22,000 paid tickets. Like you mentioned, the TV contracts don't cover the expenses like they do in the NFL. So you have to sell tickets, and you have to sell 20,000 a game. So you need probably like a season ticket fan base of 10, 12,000 plus, 8 to 10 walk up, and then the team will be successful. I mean, a lot of teams aren't getting that right now, but they have really strong ownership and they're not going anywhere. But Atlantic Canada, and they want to create a Saskatchewan type situation where people drive 100 miles or 200 miles to a game, plus the local Halifax population is their goal. So they're not going to just call it a Halifax or a Moncton team, but there are two parties interested in a East Coast team, one in Moncton, one in Halifax. So we might be close, but the biggest holdback, I think, still is the municipal, provincial, and federal governments, because they're going to have to help fund a stadium reno or a new stadium or whatever way they decide to go.
Yeah. And really quick, guys, I just don't think that the people realize in the city, right where I live, that even if they don't like sports, it will benefit the economy here locally. That's what bothers me the most, is that I'm trying to tell these people, even if you don't like sports, if you don't like football, it's going to benefit us. We don't have a place right now for outdoor concerts, for outdoor events, really. We have a great, arena and stadium that was held for the World Junior Hockey Championships. We don't have an outdoor stadium that holds a huge capacity of people for these big concerts or events. So I think it will bring people far. And I think that, like Rob made a great point about it being the Atlantic schooners, not the Halifax schooners. People will be driving several hours to come see a game. The problem is, Carm, I spoke with somebody that owns the soccer team here, and he said, Andrew, one game is not a good enough example. They're selling out the Touchdown Atlantic game because that's been promoted for months. Can they do it every single week is really the question. I sure hope they can.
Yeah, if you look across all sports, it always comes down to the advanced season ticket sales, where they can get them going. I remember, and this is switching sports, but the NHL in Vegas, and people thought, who is going to go watch a hockey game in Vegas? Maybe if you're in town, you'll watch it, but there's no way a franchise in Vegas is ever going to survive. And here they are, 5 years later, they're Stanley Cup champions, and it's a full house. But the thing about eventually getting a franchise out there is unlike major cities. You look at it, let's say Toronto is on the East Coast. You have less competition for the entertainment dollars because there are no other big franchises. Yes, there is a CPL team in Halifax, but there isn't an NBA team. There isn't a baseball team. There isn't an NHL team. So you're not vying for those entertainment dollars from other leagues and other organizations. So hopefully it's something that can work and help the city, as you mentioned. Rob, listen, I want to get into Hamilton because you're wearing that Hamilton hat. 3 wins in a row. Is this a team on the upswing? Are those real wins? They are real wins in the standings, but is this team a fraud or is this team legit?
Just one more thing about the Atlantic. The ability to host a Grey Cup is also very important to help subsidize the franchise. And if they don't have a stadium that can put 35,000 people in to hold a Grey Cup, it's going to be a problem for them. Anyway, so let's get to Hamilton. They've won, I think, 3 of their last 4 weeks. They just lost Bo Levi Mitchell again, but there's good news and bad news there. The good news is, I guess he got put on the 6-game disabled list instead of a long term. The bad news is he might be back in 6 weeks. The question to me is, why was he in that game? Why did he not kneel down? I understand the fact that, at the end of the game, you want to protect the football, you want a clean snap, but just kneel down. The game's over, and to lose your $500,000 a year quarterback over that is just, to me, it's another example like Saskatchewan did earlier. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, let's look at the 2 previous meetings, Montreal and Hamilton. The first game, I think Montreal won 25-22, and then Montreal beat them 38-12. Montreal's definitely dominating the series so far, and some say it's tough to beat a team 3 times in a row. I'm not so sure. Now let's take a look at Hamilton's last 3 wins. Week 5, the Mazzoli injury game, they beat Ottawa 21-13. They went into Winnipeg week 6, and they won 37-29. I think the win looked more convincing than it really was. I think Edmonton just quit in the second half. Week 8, Hamilton beats Ottawa 16-12 on the road. Good win. Is Hamilton a contender or pretender? I'm going to say still, unfortunately, are a pretender in my mind. This game is very big for them. Montreal's last 3 losses, they won last week, were Winnipeg, BC, and Toronto. 3 very tough games, and now they just beat Calgary. I think they're on a bit of an upswing here. The line has definitely moved in Montreal's favor, and I can see why. Montreal, let's look at their defense for like 2 seconds here. They're 4th in the league in points allowed. They've only given up 10 touchdowns all year. Hamilton's dead last in defense against the run. Hamilton gives up 120 yards rushing a game. Both teams throw the ball about the same, a slight edge to Hamilton here, but I think the front 7 of Montreal, now that Lemon has joined Sewell and Williams, throw in Decoy at safety, I think Montreal's defense is going to win this game for them, and I think Stanback's going to have a big game as well.
All right, Rob, Rob, you look at that game and 3 in a row for your Ticats. If they somehow get by Montreal in this one, I'm not saying that they won't, but then they have the Edmonton Elks up next, which seems to be like an automatic W sometimes, or it has been this season. And we're talking about a team that has now won 5 in a row before they face BC and the Argos. So a couple tough ones after that. And I will give you credit. You did tell me before the Ticats game if there are odds on Bo Levi not finishing the game, and that one would have cashed. It would have been a late cash, but it was a cash. Yeah. So kudos on that one.
A win's a win.
A win is a win, no matter how, whether it's a buzzer beater or not. Rob, we talked about the game in Atlantic Canada this past weekend, touchdown Atlantic. And that's one of the things we talk about is scheduling. And I want to talk to you about scheduling and Saskatchewan in particular. They're out on the West Coast playing BC. Then they make the long trip across Canada to face the Argos in that touchdown Atlantic game. And now they're finally back home. Talk to me about scheduling and Saskatchewan and whether they are a bet on team this week.
I think last time I checked, Saskatchewan's getting a point and a half at home this week. Like you said, they touched both oceans in the last 2 weeks. Week 7 in BC, week 8 in Halifax against two very good football teams. Week 9, they get 8 days, I think, to prepare and probably take a day off there. I think this is a very good spot for Saskatchewan. I think they're extremely happy to be home, and I think it's a bad spot for Ottawa here. Saskatchewan needs a win here. If you look at Calgary, I guess, who's chasing them, Calgary's got 3 very tough games coming up. I think they got Ottawa, BC, and Winnipeg on deck. They could go 0-3 there. So Saskatchewan's got a chance here to make a little bit of distance in between them before Calgary gets a very weak schedule with Edmonton back-to-back after the Labor Day matchups. And if you want to go back to look at this Halifax game, Fines threw for 400 yards last week. They owned the time of possession at 32 minutes. They had 3 turnovers. They had a fumble into the end zone. They had 2 failures in the red zone. And they actually, the biggest factor in this game were turnovers and special teams. Leaky for Toronto had 188 yards alone on punt returns. That's an outrageous number. So that's 200 yards of offense just on punt returns. If Saskatchewan can clean this, ball control and the special teams aspect up, I think they got a really good team of actually dominating this game and winning big against Ottawa.
All right, I like it, Rob. And what I do like? I like the big games of the week, and the big game of the week has to be this next one, which is going to be the Winnipeg Blue Bombers taking on the BC Lions. I'm not sure if this is the second. I think this is at least the second meeting of the season. They play each other. I think is it 3 times or 4 times the season? Talk about this one. And then, Andrew, I usually have a follow-up question on the game with you, but I know you're going to have a play on this game. So I'll follow up with you. We'll bring you in for the end of the Insider segment to discuss a couple more topics. But Rob, talk to us about BC and Winnipeg.
Sure. Winnipeg, 5.5 point favorite against the BC Lions. Does that sound ridiculous to you? Probably not. Winnipeg has had 2 full weeks off. Their last game was 2 Thursdays ago. So it's not 10 days, it's not 12, it's 14 days. BC traveled to Edmonton. They beat Edmonton handily, but they still played a fairly physical football game. I called BC last night. Sometimes the traveling team, if you got two Western games in 5 days, will stay in Edmonton, practice for 4 days, and then fly out instead of losing a day of travel, but home right after the game. So they got 2 travels in between. So that kind of kills some of their practice time. If you want to break down briefly the first meeting, BC dominated the game 30-6. BC are number 1 in points allowed this season. They've only given up, I think, 5 touchdowns off of offense in 7 games. But Winnipeg is still in the top 3 or 4 in every defensive category. What scares me here, and I think it's why the line is what it is BC embarrassed Winnipeg. They embarrassed their offensive line. They got a huge revenge factor. BC could see a fatigue factor and likely will in the second half. Vernon Adams is not playing. Dane Evans will play. So the play calling, I think, will be very conservative for BC. He's not a true running quarterback. He doesn't have the elusiveness that Vernon Adams did, because Vernon Adams against Winnipeg was absolutely awesome. So look for Winnipeg's offensive line to get some revenge here. Look for Olivier Area to start running the ball in the first half a lot. I think Winnipeg still has a very big offensive line. Jeffcoat and Jefferson will both be playing in this game. I think Jeff Cope missed the first one, if I'm not wrong, and give BC's fronts some fits. I think couple good matchups maybe to look at. I watched the Ottawa upset at versus Winnipeg, and I noticed that Adam Bighill in open space had all kinds of trouble. Like his run defense is fantastic, but I think Mizell from BC or the other little third down back they brought in, I can't remember his name offhand. They're going to give him all kinds of trouble with their speed and quickness. So I look for Winnipeg to establish the run here. BC's got a great defense. BC's going to be conservative. So, I'm leaning to a close game, but I think Winnipeg will pull away at the end here.
All right, and we know what happened in that first game. BC looking good. They've looked good this season, but that defense for BC, you talked about them going to Edmonton or playing Edmonton this past weekend and beating them. They've beaten Edmonton twice this season. The Elks have yet to score a point, Andrew. They lose 27-0. They lose 22-0 in their two games. I think the next time these two teams play, books should put up a line on will the Elks score, because they don't seem to be doing a very good job of it. Outscored 49-0 over two games. Andrew, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and let's not forget, like I said, money came in on the Elks, and they didn't even score a point. So I'm not sure what the reasoning is for that by any means, but that's really the thing about this BC team, is that they can score points, but their defense really shows up as well. So we ask ourselves, is BC an over or are they an under team? And ever since we had that 4-0 week to the over, we have seen all kinds of unders come piling in once more. And I think a big factor in that process is that a lot of these big point spreads, a lot of these teams that are favored to win by a lot of points, guys, once they establish a big lead in the first half, it really seems to me that the scoring is slowing down in the second half. And I think Rob and I spoke about that even earlier in the season, like, some seeing turnovers or pick sixes and things like that. And then, you see a live number of like under 54.5 and you get in under it and you really can make some money off that. So, I will take a look at some of these teams and I'll start looking towards first halves and first half overs even, because it seems to me that their back door is always open in the CFL with these big spreads. You guys know how it is. I mean, the backdoor covers happen a lot for these big teams. And also, the scoring slows down because the team that's winning, if they have a good running tandem, they will just run the ball into the ground. So that's something that I've really noticed so far this year. And, not to be afraid to just cutting your bet to a first half wager. I know for me in baseball, because of bullpens, if I'm taking a first half, it's going to be an under. If I'm taking an over, it's going to be full game. Well, in the CFL, I'm worried about teams slowing things down and not going for those big plays when they're already up by 10, 13 points. So I really recommend people to look towards the first half overs. And BC is a very good example of that. They're carrying the scoring. Look at that you just talked about, Carm, for them against Edmonton. That game is only going to go over if they scored every single one of the points, frankly. And if that's not the case, then that is staying under the total. So I really recommend people starting to look at the first half plays and not as much about the full game with these games with these massive point spreads.
Yeah, Andrew, I tend to agree, and which is why I want to throw one more question at our insider, Rob, before we let him go. And Rob, we're talking about totals. You talked about Saskatchewan in that game, in the touchdown Atlantic game. And I believe their offense outgained the Argos by 200 plus yards in that game, but they only scored 13 points. And we look at these numbers, the Argos once again go over their team total. They scored 31 points, but the game stays under the total. Are books adjusting these lines enough at this point? Because we saw a lot of unders this past week, 43 points in the Montreal game, only 27 in the BC Edmonton game. The Argos stay under with 44 points scored there, only 28 in the Hamilton Ottawa game. So another under week. Are books adjusting? Because I'm looking at the totals and we're seeing some couple 45s and a halves, a couple of 44 and a halves, a 45 and a half, and a 51 in the Argos game. Are books adjusting enough or do we wait till they go a few points lower before looking at overs?
I think you got to take it game by game, like particular matchups. Well, the one week we had 4 overs, and I looked at the lines that opened up on the Monday following that. They didn't adjust to those overs. The books held in the from the 44 to 48 range. Nobody went in the 50s, and I think every one of those games, some of those games were the 70s, and the books didn't flinch. So I don't think they're adjusting to unders. I think they're just sitting on what they believe in. The CFL is very capable of putting up some overs, but you definitely got, I think it's a good time to look at unders. I really do.
All right. Appreciate that, Rob, and appreciate you jumping in and coming back on the Insiders Report. I know it's the long weekend this weekend, so I know you're going to get up to the cottage and beat the traffic. So have a great time up there, catch some fish, or just sit on the deck in one of those Muskoka chairs and have a few cold ones
You know what?
on Andrew and I. We'll take care of you next time Andrew's in town. And we'll have a couple drinks. Andrew, I want to get um, into our opening numbers here, and we're going to get those numbers up on the screen. But inside the numbers, Andrew, have a look at these numbers and tell us what jumped out at you from the get go.
Yeah, I mean, taking a look at this Winnipeg team, we're seeing them against, the big game we talked about against BC, seeing them -5.5. A lot of love coming in towards that team. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're not seeing Vernon Adams Jr., the number one quarterback, be there. There has been some injury issues this year at the wide receiver position for BC as well. Lucky Whitehead injured, then we had Dominic Rhymes injured. There's just been a lot of guys in and out of the lineup that's made a tough impact on the team. But I strictly look at this Winnipeg Blue Bombers defense, and although we have seen some bright spots, Carm, I find it tough to see them laying this number against BC. Total at 44.5. Don't really think that number is going to budge too much. Over in Calgary, we have Calgary playing host to Toronto. They are 8-point underdogs. Excuse me, Calgary 8-point underdogs. Toronto, like I said, guys, they are 6-0 and 6-0 ATS as well. So not only are they winning games, they are covering the point spread whenever they win games as well. Montreal, as I talked about, they open up as a 1-point dog. They are current -2.5 favorites. And then we have the last game of the week, as Rob mentioned, Ottawa and Saskatchewan. You take away a little bit of the traveling stuff. Saskatchewan, a little bit puzzling how they're getting a point now at +1. I was worried about the travel spot personally for Saskatchewan, but realistically, as Rob mentioned, they have 8 days to prepare for this contest. So it's not like it's much of a short week for them, but it's just a matter of if you think that Ottawa is catching fire, if they're the real deal. You talked about Hamilton being a pretender or contender. My biggest question is about the Ottawa Red Blacks. Are they the real deal? After they were able to put up some points last week, of course, they slowed down. But that one should be a very interesting game, especially with the way the market moves. So, guys, keep an eye on these moves. As I keep mentioning, the way that these numbers move, it's been proven this year that it has not always been sharp movement and the right side. But take a little look at it right now, then look at it before the game time and kind of look at those live numbers as well, because the CFL numbers, they love to move around a lot. And I'm really curious for some of these big marquee matchups this week, how the numbers will move. And make sure you guys check out the Wager Talk live odds page. I use it all the time, always have that page up on my computer, and it's great to check things out. And when you see a number you like, right away, I'm bouncing on it, I'm hopping on it, I'm getting it to my clients as fast as I possibly can.
Absolutely. That's Andrew, our number one CFL guy at Wager Talking. You can find him on Twitter at McInnes Picks. And of course, our insider at Rob_Braley on Twitter as well, or the X, whichever you want to refer to. And speaking of X, let's get into the extra point. And right back at you, Andrew. Tell us what you have in your extra point segment.
Wow, I have to. If I was wearing a ball cap, Carm, I would tip my hat for that segue. What a segue that was! Shout out to Elon Musk for changing Twitter. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but guys, I've got a really good selection of picks for this weekend. I got a 4% on the first game of the week and a 5% going on later in the weekend. So you can grab those, of course, at wagertalk.com. We talked about totals. We talked about the fact that unders are hitting at an alarming rate. But I find that the unders are cashing in the ones that have low totals, and the ones that are high for a reason, and it's because it involves two high-scoring clubs. Toronto is a team that is scoring points on everybody. They put up 31 on Saskatchewan, 31 on the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They put up 35 against Montreal. No matter who this team seems to play, they seem to score at least 30 points. There was a time in the season where they were averaging 40 points on the season. Now, Calgary, they continue to find themselves in high-scoring games as well, no matter who they're playing against, whether it's Saskatchewan, whether it's Ottawa, no matter who it is, their defense is leaky. It seems like Jake Mayer is a second-half guy that really his offense gets going in the second half. They love to air the ball out. That offense has been made very clear. The run game is not what they thought it was, so they have to throw the ball. I like over 51, Calgary and Toronto this week here in week 9. I think we see points. I think I will continue to say, as Rob mentioned about Saskatchewan putting up big yards on Toronto. Toronto's defense is not as good as people think. Their offense is just so good that it just overwhelms people. I think both these secondaries will give up points. This one should be the most entertaining game as far as points are concerned in week 9. I'll take over 51. Stampeders and Argonauts for week 9.
Love it. And I spoke last week about the how I could be a jersey mush. It seems like the players either get traded or something happens to them. I'm going to wait till after this game is over because I don't want to mush Chad Kelly, but I am picking up an Argos jersey for the rest of the season. I need a new jersey to my collection, Andrew. So it's going to be Chad Kelly, one of the few remaining quarterbacks in the CFL who hasn't gone down to injury. So knock on wood, the man continues to play as well as he does. That was Andrew McInnes. Of course, as I said, you can find him over at Wager Talk. He's going to have a 5% play up in the CFL this weekend. So you want to definitely get on board that one. And of course, our insider, Rob Braley, really appreciate him coming on and giving us our thoughts and a lot of info that you can't find normally on Twitter. He is connected with a lot of the teams in the CFL. So we appreciate him coming on the show and sharing that. Guys, we're going to be back next week with week 10 of the CFL season. We'll talk about what happened and what shook down with this week's predictions next week. For myself, Andrew McInnes, and Rob Braley, this is the CFL Preview Show 2 and Out, and we are out.